Dun, 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 dun. I should get some theme music for this. I really should. And like a little sequence. The Spartan Life Coach presents. And then it'll be me falling backwards in slow-mo. Whoa. Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome to the Google Hangout. Tonight we have with us Dana of NarcissistSupport.com. Hello, Dana. We're going to be answering a bunch of questions, and we're going to be getting into a little bit about Dana's journey and her story and what she's about and what led her to create Narcissist Support. So Dana, what's your story? Jump right in.
What's my story? Okay, well, it's one of those things. I think the more clarity that I get about all of this, the more I realize the further back my story really goes. But kind of in a nutshell, after my divorce, which was about 7 years ago, I found myself tangled up in a series of about 5 years with two different men that I believe are sociopaths or antisocial personality disordered men. And at the time, I was also working at a domestic violence shelter. And ironically enough, I was teaching classes on how to avoid abusive people. And right. And did not realize that I was in a relationship with a guy who was incredibly charming. He was absolutely wonderful to me. And then I found out he had this double life. And my fairy tale very quickly became this Lifetime TV movie nightmare situation. And it left me really just bewildered and confused. And like you and I were talking about before the live stream started, just I didn't have the terminology for it. I didn't know what was going on. And I thought I was crazy. I thought I was alone in this. I wasn't getting validation from friends or family or even a therapist. I felt so lost in a paper bag that was my life at that point.
When you say that he was leading a double life, is it okay? Is it like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. I'm very open about my story. I actually use my stories on my site to help illustrate points, because I think that a lot of the most helpful things for me was when I joined support groups and I was able to see elements of my story in other people's story and seeing, because we're all telling different versions of the same story, really. And seeing that reflected back at me was very, very validating and very eye-opening. So with the first guy that I had dated, I just stumbled across, he was looking for sex on Craigslist, and it was with men and women and couples and, anything moving, really. And so that began me digging and thinking, well, what on earth? And uncovering all these emails, and then realizing that I had been getting sick for months towards the tail end there. I mean, a solid 8 months. And I couldn't figure out if it was a propane leak or if it was altitude sickness or if I was depressed or kind of what was going on with me. And after kind of everything came crashing down, and I actually ended up talking to his ex-wife. I found her on Facebook, and she had told me that they had gotten married. Their marriage lasted, I think, less than 60 days. And she'd found out that he was a con artist and he was after her for her money. And he was not who he seemed to be. And for me to basically run. And that was when I began putting the pieces together. We were in the process of setting up a business together. I was financing everything. And then somebody, again, I was at the domestic violence shelter working there, and somebody had mentioned, well, did you ever wonder if maybe you've been getting sick because he's poisoning you? And when they said that, I still get goosebumps now. When they said that, it was like everything made sense. And then that really spun me into this, hysteria, really. I didn't know who he was. And it was a very surreal moment to think I've been with this person for 2 years and I thought he was my best friend. And not only did he not love me, he didn't even like me. And
did you ever get it confirmed that he was actually poisoning you?
No, I had called the police, and to mind you, I had moved out by then. I'd called the police in a panic, and they had said, well, at the time I was thinking that he was using more of like sedatives, like Rohypnol or something like that. Cause I was so exhausted all the time. I couldn't, I would wake up exhausted and then I'd go to bed, and he was doing all of the cooking. He'd bring me coffee in bed every morning. He was wonderful. But the police had said, if it is Rohypnol, it's going to be already out of your system. There's nothing we could do. And then I kind of felt like, what is my problem? Why am I paranoid? Am I, why am I thinking this? And is this even reasonable to think? And am I making too big of a deal out of this? And everybody was kind of treating me like I had gone through a bad breakup. And I'm like, no, I've gone through bad breakups before, and this is different. And I was having night terrors, and I was not coping. I was waking up either screaming or crying. I didn't trust anybody. I just shut down.
Did you ever look at the possibility that these were physical symptoms that were manifesting because of the psychological trauma?
I hadn't. Now I see that. I realize that. At the time, I just thought I was losing my mind. I did not know what was going on, and I had never at that time heard of CPTSD. And I started seeing a therapist who actually worked at. There was two different domestic violence shelters about an hour apart from each other. She was a therapist at another shelter, and again, supposedly highly trained in abuse. And I was seeing her. She never connected any of this, and I kept saying, like, there's something wrong, and I don't know what's wrong with me, and I can't move forward, and I don't trust people, and I'm really jumpy, and it's like I knew that I wasn't being logical or rational, and I didn't know how to move forward with that. And so that took me several years to fully, I mean, my God, like, it destroyed my self-esteem, because he was sleeping with hundreds of people. I mean, it was not just a few, it was a lot. And, and he just didn't care. I guess I'd never encountered that before, like that lack of regard and that lack of empathy. And it was like, how can you go from, we spent all this time together, we had this amazing life, to you're never going to see me again. You just truly don't care. And here I care so much, and I'm devastated, and I can't eat, and I can't sleep, and I miss you, and I love you, and it's like nothing. I mean, but I internalized that, and I thought, well, there must be something wrong with me. I didn't realize that was him. I just thought that, I must be so unlovable, that I just meant so little to him. And so then fast forward a couple more years, I met another wonderful man, and it was, I was incredibly paranoid. The night terrors, everything began kicking up again, and I couldn't quite figure out. There were some red flags there, but nothing terribly major. I justified it thinking, well, nobody's perfect, and we've all got our stuff, and blah blah blah. And then I began talking to friends who also knew this guy, and they were all like, oh, he's wonderful, he's fantastic, you guys are two of my favorite people, and this is you just have issues because of the last guy. And so I shoved aside my own judgment and went based with theirs, and then kind of that ended up in the same way. He turned out he was married. It was a double life. And so then I began thinking to myself, well, statistically speaking, like, how does this keep happening to me? Like, what are the odds of this happening? And what is really going on here? And if there's something within me, like, what am I missing? And I couldn't figure that out. And so I was in this perpetual scramble trying to just figure out, what am I not seeing? What in the hell is going on? And how, and more importantly, how can I stop? Like, how can I stop this from happening? Mm-hmm. And so that kind of led to this, this ongoing journey with everything, and then finding these support groups online and really getting that validation and really realizing, oh my God, this is exactly what happened to me. then I started my blog. And well, actually what it was is I had met another guy online, and then it started up again, the night terrors, the doubting. And I began starting kind of this journal, talking to myself and saying, these are the red flags that I'm seeing. Am I nuts? Is it him? Is it me? What's really going on? And then I began turning that journal into my blog.
Right.
And then I started doing videos based on that. A friend of mine had said, you should really do some YouTube videos or a podcast. And I thought, yeah, why not? So I started doing YouTube videos, and then it's just really grown from there. So, I guess my whole approach with my site and with my channel has been to just reach out to other people that are going through this, so they realize they don't have to go through what I went through, hopefully, that they realize that they're not alone, they're not crazy, and that they really can move forward and heal from this. Because there's such, like you and I were talking about 10 minutes ago, there's such a lack of awareness about narcissistic abuse and what all it really entails. So.
Yeah, there is. We were saying when I did my degree, we weren't like encouraged to look into it. It was totally optional whether we wanted to study it at all. And I'm annoyed that as I'm 38 now, but when I was in my last relationship that was abusive, I was 31, 32, and I'd been working in psychology on and off from the age of 22. And I had all this experience, and I was teaching, and I've been teaching for years. I've been teaching psychology. I taught self-protection, God damn it. And I couldn't protect myself from my own girlfriend who I was living with, who was living with me and working with me. And similarly, I experienced some physical symptoms. I just wanted to ask you, when you've spoken to clients, have you noticed the recurrence of the report of certain physical symptoms of people saying that they thought they had certain other illnesses like fibromyalgia or that kind of thing? Have you heard much of that?
So yes, hindsight being what it is, thinking back to a lot of the women that were in the shelter, and currently now I'm a psychiatric nurse. And so I work with people that are mentally ill, and a lot of them have personality disorders. The more I get into this, the more I really feel like there is a direct correlation between trauma, the way our body stores trauma. And so, I mean, you name it, anxiety, depression, fibromyalgia, chronic pain, arthritis, probably even cancer, sleep disorders, probably even a lot of mental illness, I think is just unidentified trauma, ADD, ADHD, especially in children. I saw that a lot at the shelter. We had a lot of kids that would come in, and they would, when kids are being abused, they tend to regress. Yeah. And so then they start bedwetting, they start sucking their thumb, they start, they regress. And I think a lot of times, especially in children, that's this kind of impulse behavior and inability to focus is misdiagnosed as ADHD, and it's not, it's trauma. Yeah. So, yeah.
Are you familiar with Gabor Mate?
No.
I'll send you a link over to him afterwards. He's big. He's very, very big on this. That the root of addiction, the root of mental illness, very often is unresolved trauma. Now, you work as a psychiatric nurse. You were telling me before we started the hangout that did you say 10% of the population is diagnosed as cluster B?
It's right around that. So narcissists, it's right around. Well, depending on where you get the stats from, but it's sure. Narcissists are right around 3%. Sociopaths or antisocials are right around 3%. Borderlines are right around 3%. Histrionics. So yeah, it's all, and that number is considered to be low because narcissists and antisocials, they don't go to therapy. So because they never think that they have the problem. So tracking those and actually getting an accurate number as far as how many people truly have this disorder is really anybody's guess. So I would say all in all, 10% is probably pretty accurate.
So if we agree that all of these things are occurring on a spectrum, and that most, it is all a variation on a spectrum of narcissism, right the way through histrionic to psychopathy and back again. Do you think we're facing a narcissism epidemic?
Hands down.
Okay.
I do. And you know, the former or the old thought on this was that, you know, it was only people that kind of came from narcissistic parents that were getting involved in these relationships. I don't think that's true, because our society is very dysfunctional. I mean, American society, I think, especially with a lot of our media, or a lot of our movies, it breeds either narcissism or codependency. So even if we come from a healthy family, all of these messages that we're being bombarded with, as far as, you know, this whole concept of love is, you know, you complete me, right? It's just kind of the epitome of codependency. And or the opposite now with all the social media and with narcissism and this me first, and it's all about me and all of this. So it, you know, it's amazing that really more people aren't in these relationships. But you know what, though? I say that, but there probably are a ton more people out there. They probably just don't know what's going on and what's wrong, and so they're not identifying it. Like right. I never even thought to Google this. Like, I am consistently, continually impressed that people are finding us on YouTube and on Facebook and all these different things. And they're so up on the terminology, and they're so savvy with it, because they're thinking to Google that. And you probably get this too, where people will say, well, yeah, I was looking up pathological liar or sex addict, or they're kind of on the outskirts of this terminology, trying to identify what on earth did they encounter. Yeah. You know, or Googling, am I crazy? Or, you know, I think especially too with men, right? Because men, societal wise, are taught that they're not the victims, that men by and large are the abusers. And so a lot of men don't identify that they could possibly be in an abusive relationship.
Absolutely. I mean, it was one of the things that I really struggled with when I was coming out of an abusive relationship. I didn't want to talk to people, especially online. I looked at the online narcissism community because I'd heard of emotional vampirism that was called narcissism. I read about it in some old dusty bookshop in Birkenhead years before. And I was like, but I don't even know if these things really exist. I think these people maybe make too much of it. I was a psychologist, like a professional psychologist. Yeah, maybe people make too much of it. And and then I started to look into it, and too much of it matched. And I was like, nah. And then, no, more matches. And then I was talking to somebody on YouTube one day, and they said, do you know about borderline personality disorder? I said, no. He described it to me, and I was like, my God, you just described my ex-girlfriend to, like, you know her, and nobody does. Like, no. So all the people I knew in the real world, in my real life, knew, in inverted commas, this girl, but they didn't know the demon. And then this guy who I met on the flipping internet is describing the demon to me like he's a fly on the wall in the house. And I was freaked out. I was like, okay, well, now I have to acknowledge this. I have to embrace it and look at it properly, because there's clearly something here that I don't understand that needs to be understood.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a bit hazy at the moment. You could ask me anything right now and I would just talk about it. I'm really, really hazy. I tricked myself into doing a triathlon. I think it's something to do with middle age, and I trained for 3 hours today. So I'm like, wow, it's like I'm on drugs right now. Everything is like tracing. It's so cool. So we also spoke. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I have not really helped with the thing of men not talking about their story, because I've never shared my story on YouTube about my ex, because I was sent to boarding school. I have weird issues around privacy, but I will do that one day, because I think one of the good things, like, you know, gender stereotyping, women talk about how they feel emotionally. They'll talk to each other and be supportive. Men don't do that, because for us, for the bros, that's just not hetero to do that. And if you try and do that, then you get called all kinds of names for doing it. And it's not socially acceptable at this time. So at the moment, like, women are suffering. I speak to women who are suffering all the time, but I know it's worse in some respects for the men out there who are the victims of female narcissistic abusers, because the dominating narrative, the predominant narrative is this is the thing that men do to women. Abuse, domestic abuse, you immediately think of a man doing something to a woman. Every film that features the theme of domestic abuse, pretty much, is going to be a man doing something to a woman. So when a woman does it to a man, it's diminished. And if it's emotional and not physical, it's diminished. That's dangerous. Yes. That's a dangerous tendency that I think needs to be broken.
I agree completely. So when so real quick, and then I'll tell you this. So I used to work with at-risk kids. I used to teach 7th grade at-risk kids. And what I noticed there is that how kids process trauma is girls tend to self-destruct and boys tend to lash out. And I've seen this a lot. Obviously, people get older, right? So women tend to gain weight. They tend to cut. They tend to, depression. It's sort of like the socially acceptable emotion for women is sadness.
And not anger. That's like anger is an extreme social taboo for women, which I only know from doing this work. I didn't know that before. Trying to get a female client, to admit that she's angry is like trying to squeeze blood from a stone. It's really hard. Why is that?
I think it's just the way we're socially conditioned. And
you've been to the goals meetings. I wasn't allowed into those goals meetings. Did they tell you that you're not allowed to? Is it considered? Is it like an ugly emotion? Is it a non-feminine emotion? Maybe.
I think you nailed it. I think that's really what it is. It's not socially acceptable for girls to be angry, but it is for little boys. Right. But
not socially acceptable for little boys to be sad.
Right. Exactly.
You're really on something with this one. Just that. Women aren't allowed to be angry. Boys aren't allowed to be sad. That should be the title of your book.
Yeah. Right. There you go. And, because if you think about it, when little boys, when they get hurt, it's this whole idea of, oh, well, man up and boys don't cry and it's okay. And you're tough, you're a big boy. And with girls, if they get hurt, they're coddled. It's okay, sweetheart, And so we kind of keep that programming with us as we get older. And so for me, working with people at different ages and then going through this myself and just, being involved in it, but then also kind of taking a step back and being curious about it. I mean, like, this is really interesting what's going on here. And you can kind of just see the way that the trauma manifests itself. I was going to tell you something. Men. When I started my channel, okay. When I was at the domestic violence shelter, it was very much a kind of a feminist, definite female agenda, that women were victims and that men were abusers. And of course, because shelters tend to only house women and children. And so that all of the education that I had, hundreds of hours of education on abuse training, it was all about the female victim and the male abuser. And there were all these different stats to back it up. And still, I mean, you look around at different domestic violence prevention campaigns, and they have marches where men will show up, and it's kind of this in support of women is what it is. And so men will wear heels and dresses, and it's all about getting attention for domestic violence and that it's a women's issue and so on. And that was my mindset. That's where I was coming from with my channel. And I began doing videos from that angle because that was my training. As a woman, that's what I had experienced. And then I began hearing from men, and I began hearing their experience, and they would email me. They're like, Dana, please, like, we need a voice, and don't forget about us. And then it was this moment of just sheer horror of, oh my God, what have I done? Like, I've only been talking about abuse from a female perspective, and it's not a female issue. It's not a male issue. It's not a children issue. It's not an animal issue. It's just an issue. And it's so important that we don't genderize it, because when we do, then we inadvertently minimize men. And not only that, but then our radars are only set to scan for problematic behavior in a kind of a very narrow slice.
And we're also offering weaponry to the abusers. You know, from the point, like if you say, okay, we have a dominant narrative in the UK that only men are abusive and women are the victims, then if there is a female abuser, she can always use that. She can always say to her guy, well, what's wrong with you? I mean, why are you so weak? I mean, what's the problem? All I said is, all I'm doing is, what, you know. And if you say, well, this is abuse, this is emotional abuse, which never occurred to me once, I'm really cross. I wish I could go in a time machine and go back and say, listen here, miss, I know what you're doing, but I had no strategy, nothing. I had no means to defend myself against this attack. That I don't think it's too much to say that it's a kind of an emotional rape that you experience, that the savage and brutal violation of your boundaries by force and by guile at the same time, that leaves you with this psychological STD, this kind of psychological HIV AIDS virus, where thereafter you are screwed. You can't defend yourself from any viruses that come in. So that, like, I found in the years after that, 3 or 4 years after that, my life spiraled, and I went from, and it sort of accelerated. I went from one abusive relationship to the next. It was like a comedy sketch where the speed was, I was like, you know, this girl horrible, this girl horrible, this girl, and I almost accelerated through it. And I had no means of defending myself, and it was because of what was done over here. And what was done inside of a year. It was done inside of 12 months. It was a huge amount of damage, incredible amount of damage.
Yes. And it compounds. And so especially, and I think that's the worst part about emotional and verbal abuse is it just stays with you. And it's all of those seeds of insecurity and self-doubt, and then self-loathing and guilt and shame and embarrassment. And so kind of like what you're saying with men is, there's also this social construct that women are just bitchy, right? Or difficult. And so that's, again, this is why I'm such a stickler about this on my channel, where it's so important that we see the behavior and not the gender. Because, and I see this where I work, you know, working with different patients, and how it's minimized, especially with men, or it goes misdiagnosed or undiagnosed if the narcissist or manipulative person is a parent.
Right.
So it's this idea of, well, a mother could never be, you know, how could a mother be abusive? Right. Or, well, you need to forgive and forget because they're family. And it's like, well, you know what? Jeffrey Dahmer has family too. So like, you know, it doesn't, like, what kind of rationale is that? You know, it's terrible. Or the idea with men of, well, she's just, you know, all good looking women are difficult. Right. Or she's just bitchy. That's just part of it. You've got to just put up with it. And so, and they've even had on different like 2020 and Dateline episodes where they've staged different like kind of skits where they've had men verbally or even emotionally or physically pushing or assaulting a woman, and strangers will come to their rescue. But if the tables are reversed and the woman is hitting him and she's cussing at him and she's shoving him, people will actually join in, men and women, and start attacking him. So to me, that's really eye-opening, and it really shows kind of where the damage that's been done and how little people are able to really identify what abusive behavior is and how much work there needs to be done to correct that. And there's a lot of women out there. I've received a lot of hate mail from women about making abuse, bringing it to light, that the abuse
Well, how dare you ruin their game? What are you doing, Dana? That's not, you're breaking the laws of the sisterhood. Come on.
I guess. And my response to that would be, it's so important that we see the behavior, because for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you have children, especially if you have male children, right? Like we need to, the only way that we can stop this is through education, because once we know what's going on, then we can, actively work against it. We can better ourselves. Once we know better, we can do better. But it's just knowing what we're going through is the hardest thing, because we're all in this fog. I mean, like we were talking about earlier, not having the terminology, not knowing what the hell was going on, and if we're losing our mind, because so much of abuse does happen behind closed doors, or it's in really kind of insidious, kind of subtle ways in public where nobody else really sees it. So the victim thinks, am I making a big deal out of this? What's wrong? Like, there's not that validation. So it's so important that we spot it. And the other part of that is, I'm a big believer in how we do something is how we do everything. And I know in my own life, it took me a while to really see the ripple effect of this, but my relationships with those two men, they were a symptom of a much larger problem that I had. And I didn't realize that I had, and I kind of go back and I look at every major friendship I've had, every major relationship I've had, they've all been cluster B people. They've all been but I never identified it as such because I thought, well, like with my best friend in high school, well, but she's a girl, but I feel like I'm in an abusive relationship, but I can't be in an abusive relationship because we're just friends, so I wasn't connecting the dots. And now that the more I get into this, the more I see the ripple effect. And I don't think that I'm alone in that. I think a lot of people are in that, but they're probably not seeing it because that relationship with their significant other or that relationship that's caused them the most pain is the one that they're thinking is the problem.
Yeah. But there is also that rather big taboo and that Abrahamic commandment, thou shalt honor thy father and mother. So I have found, and I'm sure you found when working with people, when I say to them, we need to look at your relationship with your parents, and you just hit a stone wall. They go, it was fine. My childhood was fine. They didn't put cigarettes out on me, so it was fine.
Right.
And there's this indoctrination, this hypnosis from childhood, thou shalt honor thy father and mother, and as if saying, maybe things weren't perfect, maybe things weren't all that ideal, maybe things were done and said to me that gave me some funny ideas about myself and about the world. It's just not possible. They can't even go there.
Right.
Did you do all that family of origin stuff? Did you figure out where the tendency to go for, like you said, the guy was a con man, so yeah, like he's a sociopath and social personality disorder. Did you see that in the family of origin? Did you go to that?
So yes, my mother's father was a narcissist, and he was also a minister.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and so there's been lots of, I think, cluster B personalities within my family, but what I realized was, and again, like growing up, when people would ask me about my childhood, I would think, well, it wasn't great. I mean, there's a lot of things that could have been better, but it wasn't awful. And it was sort of this mindset of, well, they didn't put cigarettes out on me, so I guess it wasn't that bad. It was the mindset of, well, it could have always been worse. And so I was minimizing what I went through because I didn't know what to compare it to, because we are our own baseline for normal.
Absolutely.
And so it was the realization that when I was a child, I grew up with a perception. I felt very unloved and very unimportant. And my parents worked, they had their own business. They were gone all the time. And so, and my parents they're good people. They're just very emotionally unavailable. And so their 100% is probably anybody else's like 10%. And so once I realized the reoccurring theme with both the two men that I was tangled up with was they both made me feel very loved and very important. It was that love bombing. And that was my vulnerability. That's how they were getting in to my life. And that's what I was falling for. I was just so starved out for that it didn't register as a red flag. This whole whirlwind romance wasn't registering as problematic. It was registering as the exact opposite of, oh, thank God, where have you been? Because I've been so starved out and now you're bringing me food. So yay, now I'm going to be okay. And the good thing is, now that I've been able to realize that this is a vulnerability, my radar is always set to scan for that. And now I don't get caught up in these whirlwind romances anymore. I see them as problematic. But it took me a long time to see that, because I'm like, well, but what's wrong? He's Prince Charming, right? Isn't this what every girl is? Again, right? The media images and everything else. Like, well, isn't this what I'm supposed to want? I mean, he's so good to me. He texts, he calls, it's, you know, flowers and candy, and all of his attention is on me. So
Yeah.
once we know better, we can start to do better, you know?
So in that incident in that instance where you're saying you were starving for something, do you think it's fair to say, and have you seen this to be true of the clients as well, that it's actually the thing that we're starving for is kind of a self-love that we're trying to get from external sources instead?
Yes, yes. And, you know, and I had heard that before. You know, it's, you know, you really got to love yourself and be your own best friend. And I'm like, you know, this just sounds all hippie woo woo. Like, I don't really.
Louise L. Hay taught me that back in the 80s. I don't know why I didn't listen.
Yes, yes. And I didn't get it. I didn't know what that meant. And so I would like, yeah, you know, I love myself. Sure. You know, like, what is that really? You know, I didn't know what that meant. And the more I really began to realize, I wasn't loving myself. And in fact, I had been settling for crumbs my whole life, and in every way across the board. And I began asking myself the question of, well, if I really valued myself, how would I act in this situation? Or good. Yeah, or or how would somebody who if somebody really valued themselves, how would they act in the situation? And so that was kind of a good way for me to run it past, because I really felt like, well, I'm probably not the best judge of what it means to love myself, because my level of thinking is look where it's got me. So I needed other input. And so kind of thinking about other people I knew in my life that I felt really did love themselves and really did value themselves, I would ask myself, like, well, you know, what would so-and-so do in this situation? And then I would just kind of fake it until I made it, right? Like, I would just kind of think, well, you know what, this is probably what they would do. So I'm going to do that. And just kind of baby stepping my way to treating myself with value.
It's a good it's a good technique. That I like it. I'm going to steal it and use it.
Go for it. Yeah.
We were talking a couple of nights ago to test this crazy Google Hangout thing, and we managed to say something really clever. I'm using the royal we here. It might have been you that said it. We were saying about the narcissistic abuse victim syndrome, and how when people are looking for a therapist or a coach or a counselor, they really should be looking for somebody who knows what narcissistic abuse victim syndrome looks like to some degree. Do you remember us talking about that?
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about narcissistic abuse victim syndrome?
Well, you know, yeah, I think a lot of victims, they're confused, they're angry, they're probably depressed, anxiety. They have a lot of these CPTSD type symptoms, and they're probably not able to articulate what's really going on. And because, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, did you say that you spoke to, ultimately you spoke to a therapist who said that she knew you had been with a narcissist because of the state that you were in?
No, she did not.
Oh, okay.
How? I'm not even sure.
That's where our conversation drifted to. However, for me, it was at 1 o'clock in the morning, so I was like, "Oh, that was good. Yeah. We should bring that up."
Yeah,
but you can tell, can't you? You can see if somebody's been with a cluster B. You can see it on them.
Oh, they look 100 years old. I mean, they're worn out. They have a hard time making eye contact. They doubt their own perceptions about everything. They have probably, you know, a lot of different pain, like we were talking about. It manifests in different ways because emotional pain doesn't go away, right? It's it just changes shape, and it manifests in different ways. So, you know, they're probably going to therapy knowing, like, I'm angry, I'm feeling resentment, or they think that they're the narcissist or that they're the problem. They desperately want to get help because they're like, I'm just so difficult and unlovable, and I need help because I'm a narcissist. And so, you know,
I think I actually said that when I sought counseling in 2010. I think that's how I presented was I was like, well, I have narcissistic tendencies, I have anger management issues, and I'm some kind of a sex addict, because I had this thing, I'm sure you've heard this before, where you keep going back to the abusive person because of the intensity of the experience in the bedroom. So I started thinking, oh, I must be like Charlie Sheen. I must be wired wrong.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people do that. And of course, it does feel really crazy making, right? You're like, well, this relationship is toxic. I can't let them go. And so what's my problem? Why am I like this moth to a flame? Why do I keep going back to him? And how do I stop? And what's wrong with me? Because it feels like it's pathological within us. And so we must have this problem. So, yeah, I get it.
Well, there's questions coming through here, but I know that some of your people have asked some questions as well. So should we do a couple of yours, and then we'll do a couple of these from here?
That would be fantastic. And I can't see the questions coming through, so you'll have to.
I could just make them up. You have no idea.
You totally. I would not have any idea. Okay, so let's see. Cha. I definitely would like to touch on NLP at some point. Okay. So if you want to kind of weave that into any answers that you give.
All right, I will.
Okay, be my guest with that. Okay, so question number 1. How do we go about making the rumination stop? I can't stop fixating on either the pain he's caused or the love that I feel.
Okay, so I've got a really pretentious answer. It was Carl Jung that said, all neurosis is the avoidance of legitimate suffering. So it's hard for us to know when we have the CPTSD and when we've been the victims of narcissistic abuse, what's legitimate suffering and what's neurotic rumination. So one of the things that I would always do with a client, I would say, have you actually grieved? Because you have to, because it hurts. Something was taken from you, and these wounds that have been opened up, they're not about what's here and now. These wounds are like some weird sci-fi movie quantum leap wound that goes back through your lifetime. And in this lifetime, you've been several people as you've grown and become an adult. So these wounds effectively go through several lifetimes. That's not quantum woo-woo. I'm just saying that you're several lifetimes. I'm not saying back to when you were a sheep farmer in Nepal. But so these things, like, it's devastating. It's absolutely devastating. And it's going right the way back to when you were a child. And the wound then is the intensity of the emotion and the intensity of the bewilderment and the abandonment that you feel is the intensity of a child who was originally wounded most of the time by parental abandonment and rageaholic parents, borderline parents, emotionally dysregulated parents. So step 1, have we actually done the work of grieving, which nobody wants to do because it's tears and snot and it's tiring and it's not dignified and it's dirty and messy and people don't like going there, which is a real shame. And it's really disempowering because the avoidance of those places where the tears are, where all the tears aren't expressed, they just become these big pussy sacks that kind of hang around and they get very tender and sore. And then you become stuck. You can't move very much. And the more you grieve and get that stuff out of the way, the freer you become. You actually have more clarity of thought, more awareness. It's a really, really cool thing, which I found out when a friend of mine dragged me forcefully through inner child therapy, which was a hell of a long day. So so number 1 is the grieving done, and number 2 is not just is the grieving done, but moving forward, have you learned your lesson? Are you safe now? Because if you're not safe, the unconscious is going to keep sending out an alarm that says we're not safe. The unconscious mind, the unconscious impulses don't care about happiness. They don't care about personal fulfillment at the rawest survival level, at the rawest biological primal survival level. They only care about safety. So if you're not safe, if this lady is still open, well, I presumed it was a lady, it could be a man. Did you say that? Do you see my gender stereotyping? That's how easy it comes in. So this person who asked you the question, she might not feel safe. She might not have done the work to make herself feel safe, so that the unconscious can go, oh, okay, we're safe now. Let's forget about it. Those ruminations are visual flashbacks, emotional flashbacks, auditory flashbacks to things that happened, but they could be manifesting as like a CPTSD flashback. That is actually the unconscious setting off an alarm and going, be careful, we're not safe yet, we're not safe yet. So grieve and then get yourself safe and train yourself in the ninja ways of self-assertiveness and having strong ego boundaries and all that cool stuff.
Okay.
I didn't mention NLP, sorry.
Yes. What are your thoughts on narcissism staying dormant until triggered? Like, how long do you think a narcissist could hide it, I guess?
So yeah, somebody asked that on my channel like a few days ago, and I think I asked them saying, well, do you mean narcissistic traits or a narcissistic personality? I think the idea of them laying dormant is a bit of a myth, because you know, a virus can lay dormant. I can't remember where it goes. Is it the amygdala? Wherever it goes when a virus lays dormant, and then it flares back up later on. But that's not what happens with narcissism. What a person who's asking that question can see is, Fred was a nice guy along this timeline and he was fine, and then this happened, and then he became a total dick and became more narcissistic, started manifesting some obnoxious traits. That's not, he was born a narcissist, the narcissist lay dormant, and then something triggered it. The only thing that I've seen that happen, and the couple of times that I've witnessed it in my own life with people close to me happening, is they always were, but here they were fulfilled, and then click, here they were not. So we have that idea when we're studying covert narcissists that you can have the narcissist in elation, where the sack is full of narcissistic supply and everything is great, and then you have the narcissist in depletion, where there's no more narcissistic supply. And frequently why that happens is because they get older, and life just isn't, you know, now it's being adult and responsibilities, you're given less, more expectations are placed upon you, and people just start saying no. Like, you leave your home, you leave your college, you leave your university, you get out into the big bad world, and people start going, no, I'm totally not going to do that for you. And it inflicts narcissistic injury over and over and over again. And I witnessed a couple of people from the age of 24, and it wasn't just me, it was other people saying, wow, they're getting really mean and bitter and unpleasant. The personality started to go down in terms of how they came across, and they got really, really bitter, because they realized that life wasn't going to go the way they wanted. Of the two people I saw do that, one of them actually openly expressed his infantile fantasies, that he thought, and I'm going to say this even though it makes me cringe for him, that he thought he would be famous, and he thought he was going to, and I'm quoting now, date a pretty model. And he was sad that he hadn't. This is a 28-year-old man saying, I'm disappointed in life because I thought I was going to be famous and I thought I'd date a pretty model. And I was like, I can't believe those words are coming out of your face. Put them back in. But so I think the idea of it laying dormant is false. There are researchers out there who look at something called context-specific narcissistic personality disorder. Again, I think it's a little bit of a red herring. I'm with Sam Vaknin on this one. It's come from childhood trauma. The narcissistic shell has to be formed in childhood. And, you know, I'm paraphrasing Sam now. A narcissist is a narcissist when he's asleep. He's a narcissist when he makes breakfast. He's a narcissist in the pores of his skin. Every element of him, permanent, pervasive, and personal. So it can't come and go like, I don't know, cold sores around your lips do. It can't. It just can't do that. I don't think so. Yeah, I didn't mention NLP again. What do you think about that? This idea of it laying dormant?
Yeah, no, I think that it's a personality, you know, and they can hide it very well. But there's always, you know, there's always those red flags. There's always their kind of cracks in their armor. The mask starts to slip every now and again. I think, you know, I look back on my experiences, and you know, my whole thing is I am heavy on identifying the red flags. Right. And so, you know, seeing those chinks in the armor for what they are, because that's the thing with the red flags, with that mask slipping, is with the red flags, they're not seen, they're felt.
Yes.
And so a lot of people think, well, I'll be able to spot a red flag. Well, that's the thing, is you don't spot it, you feel it. And
That's a
it
good
starts
point.
off with that feeling of confusion. You know, confusion really is the first sign of abuse. And so it starts off with that feeling of, well, that's weird. Like, that's strange. And then it progresses into, well, is it him or is it me?
Do you ever make pictures of quotes of stuff you've said, because people will share it on Facebook and it's a good way of getting people to your Facebook page? Do you ever do that?
I haven't. There's
Hey,
none.
boys and girls, could a nice person out there please do that for Dana? Could you say the red flags of narcissistic abuse are not seen, they're felt? And then you said something else that was really cool. What was it? Whoever's watching this, just rewind it. You just said something awesome. You said something totally genius.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the whole, it's, it starts with the confusion.
That's it. It starts with confusion. Perfect.
Yeah.
If somebody could make that, please, and send it over to Dana, that would be cool.
Yeah,
Hey, these things, I did it the other day as an experiment. It got shared like 60,000 times in 24 hours. It was a good one.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a flipping good quote. That is gold dust in it. And everybody will agree. They'll type now that, yes, it's totally gold dust.
Yeah.
Can I ask you one of these people's questions?
Yes, please go for it.
This is from EC. Everybody who asks a question on here, please remember, boys and girls, that this Google becomes a YouTube video, and that stays live and it's out there on the internet. So don't say anything that you don't want to have found, or because if I have to go back and edit another YouTube video, I'm going to weep real tears. Ekar asks, I've been dating an amazing woman who's recovering from long-term narcissistic abuse. She's made tremendous strides in recovery. So how can I help, or rather not hinder, while tiptoeing through the minefield of triggers and flashbacks? Over to you.
Well, my 2 cents would be that it sounds like she's not ready to date. And, it's one thing to date a victim of abuse, but the victim needs to be at a place where they're healed enough to where their partner's not feeling like they need to walk on eggshells, that any little thing that they do is going to be possibly triggering, because then that's some unhealthy boundaries for the partner. But that aside, like, that's kind of my disclaimer on that. But that aside, if you're dating a person that has gone through abuse, to really have that open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication. So letting her know, hey, I know you went through some stuff, so let's talk about this. If something comes up, let's talk about this. So, and just keeping lines of communication open. But
definitely. I think with this kind of thing, it's like, if it's that bad, she should really be seeing a counselor. And I think most of the research for certainly for PTSD is the partner should be at least somewhat involved in the counseling and be aware of what's going on and supportive, because the partner is the one who will cause the most amount of triggering, because intimacy is hugely triggering anyway. So as soon as you have any intimacy, you get triggered. But if she's just come out of a long-term relationship and now she's in another relationship with another man, any intimacy is going to be triggering, but this is like triple triggering. So yeah.
And he can't heal her.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. And that would be my concern at that dynamic, is she needs to get to the place where she can heal herself, and that she's emotionally stable enough to be in a relationship, so to where he's not walking on eggshells.
Perfect. Yeah, no, definitely. It's you can get sucked into codependency this way, Mr. EC, and also you can become emotionally dysregulated and traumatized through being with somebody with CPTSD or PTSD. They've done a lot of research on combat veterans and their spouses, and it has a deleterious effect on the personality of the spouses when that happens. We're getting a lot of love here, Dana. Dana and Richard, please hang out again. Wonderful to have you both in the same space. That was from Peace Pom Pom.
Oh, yes. Hi, Peace Pom Pom. Yeah, she's a regular.
Okay, I'm going to ask you another question, if I may.
Yes.
This one comes from CF. My 8-year-old niece has suffered narcissistic trauma from her biological father. She is starting to show a lot of CPTSD traits. How do you teach a child how to work through the emotional flashbacks that come with that kind of trauma? I'm just going to hand that one over to you.
Gosh, and it's so hard, and it's so heartbreaking when there's children involved, because, you know, with adults, I'm all about regaining your power and control and healthy boundaries, and but children tend to be big time pawns in this game, and they often don't have a say whether or not they can spend time with a manipulative or an abusive parent. You know, I think my default answer with a lot of these things is going to be keeping open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication with the child, and letting her know that, and not talking bad about the abusive parent, because she's gonna feel the same. It's the same Stockholm syndrome kind of thing going on. So she's gonna feel the need to most likely justify it because he's the father, right?
Yeah, biological father. Yeah.
So yeah, so she's gonna get protective of him. So to not talk bad about him, but just to let the child know, you know, I'm sorry that this is happening to you. It's not okay that this is going on. Do you want to talk about it? How could we maybe handle this? You know, what would make you feel comfortable? And then I would see too, working with the courts to see if you could get either visitation supervised or reduced.
It's that was a hell of a question though, wasn't it? That's a tricky question.
Yeah.
So CF, that question you asked is really, really hard to answer in the third person. Dana's just given you a really good answer there. I wouldn't have much more to add other than just say I tried to answer this in an article written by Layla Lorick 2 weeks ago that's entitled "When Children Are Involved." And I don't like answering this type of question because I don't like telling people how they should parent. But if it were me, I can tell you that, as Dana just said, the communication with the child is crucial. And the child, she's young for this. She's so young for this. But, you know, she's growing up with a narcissistic father. She's going to end up growing fast either way. She's probably already, as you said, she's developing CPTSD traits. So her childhood is being stolen from her anyway. And you can't stop that. You can reduce the pain. So when I said she's young for this, this is what I'm about to say. She needs to be taught in language that she can understand, that she has the right to say no, that she has the right to sort of refuse communication that's coming her way. And if she thinks that daddy is wrong, or he's being mean, or he's being unfair, then that's okay for her to think inside of her head, no, this is wrong, and this is mean, and this is unfair. And she doesn't have to say no out loud to feel no inside and reject the communication. That's how I would do it. But you know, as we're both saying, it's a really, it's tricky. It's like, if you get that wrong, you can do the child a lot of damage. If you get it right, you could save her from a lifetime of therapy and having to watch YouTube videos about how to overcome this stuff by people who've suffered the same right. Exact thing.
And I would also add to that too, just letting her know that this is not her fault, and that she's lovable, and trying to, whatever her dad is telling her that's abusive and diminishing, to let her know this is not true, and here's why it's not true. I'm not just blowing smoke at you because I'm your mom or because I'm related to you. It's because, you know, if your dad is saying that you're stupid, well, here's, you know, well, your father is wrong. Like, you're not stupid. And here's how you're not stupid. Like, you did really a great job on your homework, and proving to her, this is why you're smart. This is why you're good. This is why you're lovable. And to really counteract those messages, because kids, we internalize everything, because we take our parents as words as gospel truth.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Should we have one of your people's questions?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. What are your thoughts on how to decrease codependency? That's a big question, but
I'm going to answer this and weave NLP into it somehow. Okay. How would you do that? Okay. So codependency is brought about when boundaries are smashed in childhood. and the child is forbidden from saying no. Every boundary is a no. A codependent is somebody who has porous or no boundaries, and they need other people in order to validate their sense of self. And then they chase people, as you have and as I have, to try and get love, but not just love from like a nice person who's a nice, loving person. You're trying to get love from a cruel person. In my case, I would try and get love from women who were borderline tendencies, histrionics, because that was where I was trying to get love in a Freudian sense from the child, and that's what I was trying to win back. So what you're left with is a messed up belief system. The NLP element to this would be that the map is not the territory. So what's actually going on in the real world is the territory, and the map is how you think about the world. Well, your map in this case are the beliefs that hold the codependency in place, and they can actually be broken down. They can actually be identified, and you can target them. And then NLP is really good. It's not good at everything. Like NLP isn't great for this kind of work, but little bits and pieces of the work, NLP has some great stuff for. And belief change is one of them. But what they would tell you to do is to break down the beliefs that hold codependency in place. Like, it is not safe for me to say no. So you can identify, you say, I feel really unsafe and freaked out whenever I say no, or whenever I set a boundary. You identify that belief. You attack the belief. You say, how do you know that this is false? How do you know that are there ever any times where it's true? When it is true, how far is it true? And you really pick the belief up and shake it around. And then you start asking the question, would it be better to believe that maybe sometimes it's good to say no, that maybe it's important to say no, that maybe it's pretty unhealthy and dangerous to never say no? As Gavin de Becker wrote in The Gift of Fear, he talks about women particularly becoming the victims of violent sexual assault because they switch off their own intuition. So he's going through the crime reports where women have said, I feel dodgy about going into this guy's apartment, but I went anyway because he told me to, or to see what would happen. And there's like this slow boundary break that over a period of time before any violent assault actually occurs. So this ability to say no is really, really important. And NLP does speak to that a little bit. The whole thing of the map is not the territory. NLP didn't invent that. That's a term by Krzyzewski. It comes from linguistics, because language is always a reference to the territory. But not, it can never point to it. It can never be the territory. So we can never really see reality as it is. We only have our map. We only have our minds and our perceptions. And the realization that somewhere in the software there's a break, there's a fault. You've got beliefs running like, I must never say no, or good girls always do as they're told, or good girls never get angry, or whatever that particular, or boys don't cry, and boys should never ask for help. And that's how you fix it. It's a slow, laborious process, because the damage that is done when you're a codependent is extensive, and it's deep, and it's in childhood. So rehypnotizing yourself as an adult out of things you were hypnotized into with trauma when you were a child takes time, but it's possible. I went around the houses with that one. I think I gave myself a headache talking.
No. That was a fantastic answer. And then, okay, so kind of on the heels of that, how would you, I guess, can you speak a little bit about trauma bonding and how to break that?
Trauma bonding. Wow. So the term trauma bonding, there was a video I did. I used to run a YouTube channel for the Street Fight Secrets thing, and it was this big, popular YouTube channel that eventually got shut down because I had a falling out with Alex Jones, and he sent people out to flag all my videos and get rid of them. And he wrote articles about me saying I was a violent thug because he's mature. So one of the things that on that channel that got really popular was I did a video that was about domestic violence, and it was about it was after I watched an American TV talk show, and they were talking about the expert on domestic violence was asked very innocently by the news anchor, why don't women just leave? And it was painful to watch this poor woman who was the expert on domestic violence. She didn't have an answer. She didn't have a cogent answer. And I was like, that's not really good enough. I'm supposed to teach people how to protect themselves. Let me go and find out an answer. And I Googled, this is 2009. There's probably loads more information now. I went on the internet, I looked and looked and looked and couldn't find anything that really satisfied me as a psychological answer. It was like, women don't leave because they don't love themselves enough. Like you said before, it seems a bit, it's true, but it feels like, oh, what does it mean?
Right.
And there's a lot of very vague answers out there about, or she's afraid of the consequence. And it was like, well, evidently, like rationally, it's not always fear of some hideous, sometimes it is, but it's not always that keeps people there. And I actually ended up stumbling across a bunch of American websites on cult psychology. You guys are the experts in the world on cult psychology, as far as I could find. Maybe somebody's going to correct me now and be like, no, it's the Netherlands. We've always known. I only found there were no English sites on cult psychology. I think cults is a bigger problem on your side of the pond. And they broke it down, and it was like the whole notion of love bombing. I first heard when I was studying cult psychology, and then I found trauma bonding. Trauma bonding, as they described it in a cult setting, the example they gave would be if you took a child and fed them and then abused them, and fed them and loved them and then abused them, and then screamed at them and terrified them, and then locked them in a cupboard, and then took them back out and cleaned them up and gave them fresh clothes and fed them again, up, down, up, down, up, down. The love and the hate and the care and the rage, all at the level of the limbic system, kind of merge into one, and you get this very deep Stockholm syndrome, this very deep bond between the abuser and the abused, the torturer and the person receiving the torture, that is called trauma bonding. So if we share a deeply emotional experience, you know, at the nicest romantic level, it would be fun and we would have a nice time and there'd be dancing and wine and wonderfulness, or it could be horrifying. We could be the survivors of a horrendous car accident or a terrorist attack. It would be the same. It could have the same power of a bonding effect, which would be the trauma. And if I was Slavoj Žižek, I would argue that love is a hideous, traumatic sort of assault on the senses anyway, but I'm not, so I won't. So yeah, that's trauma bonding.
Yes. And just a little interesting aside to this. So I guess anybody that wants to, if you're wanting to go on a date and you really want to bond with somebody, a kind of shortcut way to use this trauma bonding in their favor is to go see a horror movie. It's psychologically it's the same thing. So it's all of those release of the chemicals and then it's at the end of it, it's like, oh, we finally escaped it. And so they've shown that couples tend to have this artificial bond that's created after seeing a horror movie.
Now that explains why horror movies and romance are always I've always wondered about that. Like, why do people do that? So it's about more than just clutching each other in the dark then.
Yes.
Because that's where my brain went to. I was like, it must all be about the clutching. So yeah, it's proper adult reasons.
Right. It's an excuse to grab onto your partner, but there's a lot more going on there. So yeah. Let's see. Let me give you another question here. Okay, so I guess, can you talk a little bit about NLP and how it works best for victims, for us to help move forward?
Neurolinguistic programming is not at this time set up per se for the victims of narcissistic abuse. Neurolinguistic programming, you know, I have an ambivalent relationship with it. I see huge potential in that field, huge potential, and it's really underused. Why is it underused? Because it has a dreadful reputation. Why does it have a dreadful reputation? Because they make preposterous and unscientific claims and have crazy marketing that doesn't make sense, and a lot of the people in that field do naughty things that they shouldn't be doing. And I know of a few cases where people who were cluster B learned NLP to be better at, doing what it is that they wanted to do. So it's kind of like, it's like a discipline that's perpetually been in a beta phase. It's always in a beta format. It's never really finished. But it does have like fantastic tools and techniques in it. So to use NLP to move forward, NLP won't give you a direction. It won't give you a compass for moving forward. You would need somebody who specializes in what narcissistic abuse is and what CPTSD is, you would need somebody like Dana to tell you, okay, this is the process, this is how we're going to move forward. Once we've set an objective, whatever it is, then NLP can help. So if we say, okay, we need to, you've been in the house too much and you're not exercising anymore, we need to run a motivation strategy on you to get you back out the house and get you to take like a walk once a day, just to get you, blah, 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 whatever the thing is, the specific thing, that's where NLP will come in. And NLP has things like motivational strategies and strategy elicitation. It would be, it gets quite technical because they want to elicit strategies and then break it down into the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic representations. That gets a bit techy. A real simple example of a strategy for motivation. So you're a bit depressed and you don't want to get out of bed and you want to spend too much time in bed and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's time for me to start getting on with my life. So what they did in NLP is they noticed that when people stay in bed, they wake up and they feel how good the pillow feels on their face. And they go, oh, it's so comfortable here. And then they just scan, they do like a scan inside of their body of where feels really comfortable and where feels really good. And they just stretch into it. They go, People who get out of bed quickly, people like me who suffer from insomnia because there's too much going on, as soon as they open their eyes, a voice speaks quickly and loudly and says, what are we going to do? What's the best thing we could do right now? And they start creating pictures inside of their mind and running a soundtrack inside of their head that motivates them to get up. The pictures that you're running inside of your head, NLP is all about the pictures in your head. If you want to know what NLP is all about, it all comes down to back to the pictures in your head. These are like the advertising messages you're running at any moment in time. So if I'm lying in bed and I go, oh, I really want to get up and do that thing today, and then I'm going to go to the gym, and then I'm going to walk the dog on the beach, and it's going to be sunny, and it's going to be so cool, it's going to be awesome. Bang, I'm out of bed and I'm gone. If I lay there going, oh, the sheets feel so nice, the pillow's got on my face, then I'm going to stay there longer. So NLP can't give you a direction and a blow by blow how to move forward in recovery for narcissistic abuse. But once you've identified key things that you need to do, that's where NLP comes into its own and can be applied and is fantastically useful.
I like it. Okay.
Cool. Very cool. I got a question for you.
Go for it.
Is there anything we can ask a person when meeting them for the first time that will identify them as a narcissist or toxic person?
I don't think there's any necessarily like one question. I think the biggest strategy that any of us have with identifying problematic people is time. Like you were talking about earlier, it's their personality, that they are a narcissist 24/7, 365. And so those red flags will surface. And, based on my experience, based on the people that I've talked to, we'll start feeling those red flags within like the first week. So, and every person has different red flags. So that's the thing. And we may not, they might not be major red flags. I mean, that's why it's so important that we are able to assess, like with your street fighting, if we are able to know our opponent, like we know that narcissists exist, we know how they operate, then we're also able to assess ourselves for any potential vulnerabilities. We know our strengths, we know our weaknesses, so we know what we're going in with. So if we know we're incredibly vulnerable or that we're lonely, for example, or if we're starved out in some area, to work on having that not be a vulnerability. I refer to that as filling that bucket. It's sort of like going to the grocery store. Like, you don't want to go to the grocery store when you're hungry. Like, you don't want to go date when you're lonely, because you're not going to make good decisions, because then you're going to run into, you're going to crash into a cluster B person who
Why didn't you tell me that 4 years ago?
I know, right?
Don't date when you're lonely. Hey, those people, make another quote for Dana, please.
Yes.
Just make the quote, make the picture, send it to me, and you can have any course you want. Just do it. Just get that done. That's awesome.
Yes, I actually heard a great acronym the other day that said something along the lines of "don't make decisions," and then it said "halt," and it's when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
That's awesome.
And I thought that was so fantastic. Yeah, because
that's perfect.
We're not thinking straight. So yeah, giving it time. And if you have any doubt in your own judgment, to have other people that you do trust their judgment, ideally friends or coworkers or whoever, meeting this person as well. And because they'll tell you the truth.
Yeah.
If they're seeing red flags.
You said that you feel rather than see red flags, and the first thing that you feel is confusion.
Always confusion. It's always that sign, because when that mask slips, right? And it like, again, it can be something subtle, right? And so it could be something like, you know, they just happen to mention they haven't seen their children in 5 years. Or do you see them? It's like a little something that registers as like, well, that's kind of weird. Like, what's up with that? Or, you know, in my situation, it's like, here's an example of like a minor one that just was, that's odd. It's like those situations were like, that's really weird. One of the guys that I was with had mentioned how he had been very successful and had all this money. And I honestly didn't feel that he was trying to brag. I thought he was just kind of telling me his past. Well, then we had stopped to get gas. We were going on this trip, and he'd only put in $10 worth of gas. And right. And so then my thought was, exactly. And I just thought, well, that's kind of strange. Like, why wouldn't you just fill up the tank? And then, of course, that was kind of foreshadowing for, actually, no, this guy was terrible with money and, you know, was bouncing checks right and left, and all of this had been a lie, and everything was a lie. Mm-hmm. So it's just those little things that seem off, that's our sign to do more digging. Because I think this is where a lot of us codependents go wrong, is when we're dating, we're so focused on being chosen instead of being choosy.
Absolutely.
Right? And we're like, oh, but he's so cute, or she's so cute and nice and funny and charming, because they are, and they lay it on really thick. And it's like that warm maple syrup on the pancakes of our soul, you know, and like we just eat that up. But we have to go into it with our eyes wide open and not with rose-colored glasses on.
You just said there something that I think is really important, which is maybe we shouldn't be chasing pink unicorns. Because when I look back at every abusive relationship I've been in with like somewhat opened eyes now, I'm like, dude, seriously, are you kidding me? You need some psychological description of a red flag. Just open your eyes and look how that person operates in the world. Look at that person's reputation. Look at how they dress. Look at what they say. Look at how they treat people. If we both assume this is a dating question, so I'm going to keep with that. If you're on a date with somebody, see how they talk to the people who are serving you. That's usually a good one. That's usually like see how nice they are to people they don't have to be nice to. That can be a big indicator. But you know, I get stories from people who say, "Oh, I met a guy. He's 32. He's a beatboxing fire juggler, and we had a relationship, and it didn't go anywhere." And I'm like, well, I'm not your dad, but if I was, I would say, well, what did you think was going to happen? Like, if somebody's clearly, I'm not like casting aspersions on people's lifestyles, but come on, boys and girls, like, be grown up, please. Like, be grown ups. You'll say, I've done it. I was crazy. I was silly. But if you just say to yourself, okay, if I'm going to be a grown up now and be sensible, what am I seeing here? Come on. It seems to be there's like a cynicism switch that gets switched off in codependence, doesn't it?
Well, yes. And I think that switch has everything to do with cognitive dissonance.
Right.
And so that's one thing that so this is what this picture is up here with the fox. There's the Aesop's fable with the fox and the grapes. Google it, but it's all about cognitive dissonance.
Okay.
And how we justify, minimize, deflect, deny when we want something and can't have it. So when our beliefs don't match our behaviors, we enter this fog of cognitive dissonance. And so this was the
justify what and what? What do we do?
When we can't, when our beliefs don't match our behaviors, we start justifying.
And justify, deny, and something else.
Justify, minimize, deflect, deny.
That's great.
Blame.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Really,
And it's
really
all of these kind of psychological defense strategies that, so here's kind of my theory on it. I think our brain is really wired to get our physical needs met and our emotional needs met. And our brain is always trying to get those needs met. And nothing else, no higher level thinking or functioning can happen until those needs are met.
Right.
And so so that's why when we're with somebody, if we're starved out, right? So if I'm starved out emotionally, all of a sudden this person who looks like they could fill that need for me, all of a sudden becomes really, really attractive. And so I think you'll find like a lot of victims are like, I wasn't even attracted to this person. Like, I don't even know, like there was nothing there and they were obviously problematic, but they weren't able to see it. Well, it's just this, to me, I really strongly believe it. It's this psychological fog that we enter that keeps us, sorry, there's a fly, that keeps us stuck in this situation, because it's like our brain's way of saying, it's that attitude of scarcity of no, you got to cling to what's a sure thing. This person's a sure thing, so stay there. And it's how we rationalize our behavior. And so the more starved out we are, the more bizarre our decision making becomes. Sort of like, again, with cults, right? So you've got these people in that get involved in cults. A lot of them are incredibly educated, like the Heaven's Gate crowd. A lot of them were engineers. And so it's sort of like, well, how are these people who are trained in logic and reason getting involved in these cults? And it's because these cults are meeting a need, just like gangs meet a need for kids. So people get caught up in these promises of, we're going to fill your emotional needs. And so they stay with the cult. Well, they're justifying all of these things that are not lining up. And so they're staying there because it's kind of this new sense of family and it feels good. And it's all of this dopamine that's being released. And so.
Well, with the Heaven's Gate people, they thought they were going to a special magical place, didn't they?
Yes.
Which makes you special. And if you join like a gang, then again, you're special. It's specialness, isn't it? We have this drive to be unique and special and significant.
And accepted and important. And yeah, so it's the same kind of thing happens with dating. And I think that's why when these relationships come crashing down, right? I mean, you look at any Jerry Springer episode or any reality TV kind of talk show, and you've got all these people fighting. And, you know, as an outsider, because we're not emotionally involved in it, we can see it so clearly. We're like, what are you doing? This is, you know, you're buying all of these lies, you're falling into all of these stories, but they cannot accept that their partner is cheating on them. They cannot accept this is true, even though this guy might have 6 kids by 6 different women, right, that are all 6 years old. Like, they still can't admit that he could possibly cheat on them, because if they did, then it means that they'd have to leave.
Yeah.
And they don't want to let go of him because they're so starved out emotionally. And then in abusive relationships, oftentimes the codependent person makes that abusive person their whole world. So it's this whole, my guess is on an emotional level, it's like, but if you leave, I will die. Like, I have nothing else. I have no money, no education, no job, no place to go. You are my whole world. I have no friends. I have no family. You're it. And so not only are you going to go, but if you go, then I have to admit to myself that this is a really bad relationship and it's been bad for a long time. And so then all of that guilt and shame and embarrassment comes in, which drives a lot of people that get involved with abusive relationships or cults or online scams. It drives them to suicide because they just can't handle it anymore. Because that's sort of like, I must be stupid. How on earth did I get caught up in something like this? I should know better. I mean, that's what I went through. Here I am teaching the classes on this, and I kept getting tangled up in it, and I couldn't figure out why. But I really believe that that's why. So.
What you just said is awesome. Maybe if some kind person out there could just like write a note in the YouTube comments for the time thing where Dana just said that, because I'm going to turn that into a clip. I love that. That was brilliant. And a big piece of the jigsaw puzzle just clinked into place for me in my head. That was fantastic. Can I ask you one more question?
Yeah.
Here we go. This was highly upvoted in the question and answer section. Okay. How can I improve my terrible self-esteem? The narcissist abuse left me crippled and doubting my worth on every level. I want to move forward, but doubt myself so much. I find it so hard to build myself back up. I don't even know where to start.
That's a big one. I can really, really relate to that. I think affirmations can be huge. And Louise Hay's book, you're talking about it earlier. I just recently read this book, and here's what's interesting about this. I read this book, a guy friend of mine who had been narcissistically abused had recommended Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life, recommended it about 6 years ago. I was so excited to get it. I opened it, read about 5 pages, and thought, this is like pretty far left on the hippie woo-woo spectrum. And I could not get into it. It did not resonate with me at all. And I didn't touch it again for 6 years. I just picked it up about 3 months ago and read it. And it is absolutely fantastic. So I think that's a good start with healing a lot of those wounds. And she's big on doing what she calls mirror work. So it's doing affirmations in the mirror, which I had never thought to do before, but it's incredibly powerful. So you're making eye contact with yourself. You're talking to yourself. You're telling yourself, you know, I am loving. I am loved. You're doing a lot of these things. You're focusing on what's right. And realizing that the narcissist, these manipulative people, what they told you isn't truth. What they were telling you was designed to tear you down, and they are intentionally focusing on all of your weaknesses. So if you are self-conscious about your height or your weight or, you know, your hairline or how you are in bed or what have you, that's the stuff they focus on, and they grind their victim down by focusing on that. And it's not true. Like none of a narcissistic relationship, it's all smoke and mirrors. You know, not only do they not love us, they don't hate us either. Like none of it's true. Everything that they said is a lie. And to realize you can reject everything that he said and you can pick up new empowering beliefs. And, you know, that was what a big aha moment for me was realizing, yes, these relationships cause a tremendous amount of damage in our lives. Our lives are blown to pieces and we're left standing around looking at this pile of rubble. But the beauty in that is that we get to choose the pieces that we pick up and rebuild with. And so realizing, okay, we gave our power and control away. And so now it's time we get it back. And so obviously there were some issues there with this person, with myself, I think with any of us that go through it, that we allowed somebody to have such a tremendous negative impact on our lives. Now we can start really working that and examining that and realizing, okay, this is the areas that need work. And I'm going to just choose empowering beliefs from here on out, and empowering people and empowering situations and empowering everything from here on out, like no more crumbs, and just start moving in that direction. The clarity, you know, healing is a process, and the clarity will come. Just keep heading in the direction that you know you need to head, and be patient and kind and loving to yourself. And it's a journey. It really is. So, my 2 cents.
That was an excellent. I think that was an excellent answer. I don't think I have much I could add to that. You know, HM, you mentioned you have terrible self-esteem. The narcissistic abuse left you feeling crippled and doubting your worth on every level, is what you said. So I won't go over what Dana already covered, because she gave a very thorough and it was a really good answer. Slightly different angle, something that probably worth bearing in mind is somewhere along the way last year, when I was talking a lot about narcissistic abuse to clients and to people, I came across the idea where I was comparing narcissistic abuse with an abuser and one person in a relationship, and narcissistic abuse in inverted commas between a government and its people, and how a government will gaslight its people and scapegoat certain sections of the community to provoke an emotional reaction. And I had this little like a light bulb moment where I thought, whatever you're thinking or whatever you're feeling, if you're in a narcissistically abusive relationship where you just came out of it, that's because that's what they want you to think, especially as it pertains to the relationship. So if you feel crippled and doubting your worth on every level, that's because he wants you to doubt your worth on every level. I'm sorry, I've assumed that this is a gentleman we're talking about. Whoever the abuser was, whoever your ex was, they want you to doubt your worth in every level, and they want you to be crippled. And this is part of the insane level of cruelty of the true cluster B. They can't just leave you. They can't just say, oh, well, we didn't work out, enjoy the rest of your life and walk off, be well, and on the merry way. They have to break you, and, to be gross, they have to really, really fuck you up inside, because it makes them feel important. It makes them feel significant. The idea that you would just go on and get on with the rest of your life is unbearable to this person. The idea that you're crippled, that they destroyed you, that's like a drug. It fills them up with this narcissistic supply, this godlike power that they had over your life and over other people's lives. Again, as Dana said, it's smoke and mirrors. So the intense love, sorry, that wasn't real, and that was smoke and mirrors. Now the intense self-loathing and the crippling self-doubt, again, it's smoke and mirrors. What he or she has told you about you, either directly by saying, hey, you are X, Y, and Z, or by implying it through the way they treated you in a relationship, none of it is true, as Dana just said. It's all about them and the effect that they're trying to generate. Do the work, go back to where the roots of these self-esteem issues are. Ultimately, as it is in vampire, in some areas of the world, in vampire mythology, the vampire can't get in unless you invite them in. They have to actually be brought into the house. Well, you invited a vampire in. Why you did that, that's the puzzle box that we need to crack. That's what we need to get into. And how are we going to make sure you never do it again? That's the work that you need to do moving on from here. You will find it hard to build yourself back up. I couldn't get any traction after my last relationship. I spent years slipping around in the mud, thrashing as hard as I could. No amount of NLP or psychology or personal development books that I'd read in my life helped me one bit. If anything, they made me feel worse, because I felt so thoroughly ashamed of my inability to move forward. I felt so ashamed and guilty about the fact that I was throwing my life away. I didn't have this understanding. I didn't have people like Dana to tell me that you shouldn't date when you feel lonely. I feel like somebody should have mentioned that to me somewhere through the years, and that they didn't. I feel ripped off by that. So yeah, you can do it. I mean, in 2010, I was living I threw my business away. I threw 2 businesses away. I was living in a garage in New Zealand underneath somebody's house, and I was doing door work. I was working as a nightclub security guard 3 or 4 nights a week in a Maori firm. I was the first white guy they ever employed, working really, really hard doors as a 32-year-old. And I still have the injuries from those days because I couldn't eat. I couldn't feed myself. I was halfway around the world, away from home, no money, total wreck. That's 2010. It's 2016 now. It's not much long later. You can pull yourself out of this. You can get yourself out of this tailspin, and you can move forward. But it does take a degree of bravery and courage and mental strength. When you do it, on the other side, you will be far stronger than you ever imagined. Like Obi-Wan Kenobi said to Darth Vader, he said, "Strike me down, Vader, and I'll become more powerful than you can ever imagine." Well, guess what? Vader struck you down, but you're coming back, homie. You're a Jedi.
Yes, and I think a lot of it too. That was good. I like that. I like that. A lot of it for me, it was the realization one day. I was, I was kind of moping around, and I felt so incredibly broken, like so profoundly broken, that I was just damaged goods from here on out. And this is before I found the support groups, before I understood what I'd gone through. And it was just kind of this moment of clarity, this realization of you've got to dig deep and find your fight, and just realize, making the declaration of, I am not going to let this destroy my life. I think just starting there, just embracing that Just making that declaration. I am not giving this the power to destroy my life. Like, F them. I don't know how. I don't know how I'm going to move forward. I don't know how I'm going to rebuild, but I'm not going to give us the power to destroy my life. And for me, I think just kind of reining in my emotions like that, because at that time I had everything, every emotion on the table. I mean, suicide was out there. I had a lot of different, I did not know where I was going to be emotionally or physically. And then just realizing, okay, you know what? I need to just take the thought of suicide off the table. Like, that's not even open for debate. Let me just not even entertain that idea. I need to stop entertaining the idea that this is going to destroy my life. So, okay, now where does this leave me? And then the second part of that realization was, yeah, you know what? Like, not only is this not going to destroy me, I am going to take this and I'm going to make this work towards my highest and greatest good. And again, you might not know how to do it. I didn't know how to do it. But that was the direction that I began heading. And then it was kind of, I just was feeling so empowered. I'm like, yeah, you know what? And not only am I going to make this work towards my highest and greatest good, I'm going to make it work towards other people's highest and greatest good, because really the best revenge is a good life. And just pour your energy into making that happen. And that positivity breeds positivity. And
absolutely.
yeah,
absolutely. You can spiral up, it seems, with good karma by helping other people, and that certainly helped. It helped me to help other people. When I started out the Spartan Life Coach project, most of what I was saying on the videos was stuff that I needed to hear, and I just helped as many people as I could for free, because I don't know, I just I didn't think that people should go through that kind of thing without knowing what it's about and why to do it. Dana, can I ask you, where are you from?
I am originally from Texas.
Really? Texas?
Yes.
Okay. The reason why I asked you is I was wondering why, like, I also, the Louise L. Hay voice and message, I couldn't get it at all. It was too hippie woo woo. It was a bit Californian. So I was wondering if maybe there was like a state issue, like Texas core values versus California perceived values might not be lining up. And I wondered because if you heard that through somebody else's voice, exactly what she says, but just in somebody else's voice with somebody else's style that was a bit more earthy, maybe even had some cuss words in it, and was just a bit more modern language, maybe it would be more accessible to people. Because I think it's great material as well. I think the Louise L. Hay stuff is great. I still refer to it to this day.
Yeah.
But then when people listen to it, they're like, oh, it's all a bit wispy and weird. And, you know.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that's everything, right? It's kind of establishing that rapport. It's the whole, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Mm-hmm. And so her language, her terminology, a lot of it was pretty far out there for me. Yeah. And I consider myself to be pretty open to hippie woo-woo stuff. So it wasn't that I was closed off to it. It took me a while to really, when that first relationship happened, I felt so incredibly victimized. I'm like, how does this have anything to do with my self-love? Like, it was so, like, not even in the ballpark for me. I did not even connect that at all. It was, you might as well give me a book on like auto mechanics. I mean, I did not see the connection at all. And so, now I do, but it's taken me 6 years to get there, to see the connection.
I would say to anybody out there who's interested in it, just look up her material online. There's loads of free stuff out there. Find the Louise L. Hay technique and just try it a couple of times a day for 7 days, and come and tell me it didn't do something. It works, man. Her stuff, it works. It is kind of goofy because the throat chakra is where all the change happens. So you touch it, and before you do any affirmations, you touch the throat chakra and you say, I am willing to change. All is well in the universe. Okay, sounds a little wacky, but just do it. Just do it. It does have an effect. And like you're saying, there does seem to be something too, where you make that decision and you go, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to kill myself. still alive. My vision was always like of a pit bull clamping down. It's primal. It doesn't know why it's clamping down, but in a stressful situation, in a hunting situation, it just goes, ow, and it just bites down as hard as it can. And I was like, well, I can't fix this, but I'm not giving up. So, ow, I'm just going to bite down as hard as I can. And that allowed me to get through a lot of crap to the point where I could get into like that decision that you were talking about, where you kind of just need to embrace positivity. You kind of just need to go, like, I actually deliberately went on a negativity diet for a month at the end of 2013, December. I was like, right, this is it. I'm going to clean up what's going on inside my mind. There's way too much negativity. This is what I'm going to do 5 times a day. I'm going to do these affirmations. I'm going to do these visualizations for a month and see what happens. Things got pretty good for me after that. I would recommend it.
It's huge. I haven't personally, I have not had a TV in my house in 7 years.
Wow.
And yeah, I don't miss it at all. And I'm very selective about what I feed my brain with, and who I'm around and what I let influence me. And I think it's, I saw this when I was working at the domestic violence shelter, is a lot of women there, they'd come into the shelter, then they'd want to watch Lifetime TV movies, which I don't know if you're familiar with that channel, being across the pond like you are, but it's a lot of, these women victimized kind of movies. And I'm like, you guys, what are you doing? Like, this is not helping you sleep at night. This is not, this is not the stuff we need to be watching. And was a big fan of doing affirmations and working with our thinking, because, we've got to dig deep and find our fight, and to feed our brain with good things. I was a big I watched a lot of comedy, stand-up comedy back then when I was going through stuff. There's a ton of it on YouTube. Dave Chappelle was my personal favorite. And so, yeah. And, just doing something to change your state. And comedy is a great way. Music is a great way. It kind of tiptoes around the amygdala, and it just gets into, there's no resistance there. We listen to a song, it can put us in a good mood. We can watch a comedy, it puts us in a good mood. And just tripling up on your self-care like that is huge.
Definitely.
Learning how to make yourself feel good.
Yeah, I watched a lot of stand-up comedy and recovery. Maybe there's something to that. I did it. I don't even know why I was doing it. I don't know. Yeah, maybe that. Maybe I was like, oh, well, I've got this dark perspective of everything. Maybe, you need to bring a sense of humor to it. I don't know what I would have done without being able to listen to, Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, Louis C.K., Patrice O'Neill. I don't know. I don't know what I would have done without that.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I know it's late for you.
It's 20 to 3. I was awoken by a barking dog at 7:30 this morning. There's somebody who has a dog barking down there. But I didn't want to open the window and yell at them, at their owners. But I can't yell at the dog because he doesn't speak English. He's a Portuguese dog.
Right,
but
of course.
But I've been awake for a long time. That's why I'm gabbling now.
Yes. Well, okay. Well, last question for you. Speaking of which, my community wanted to know about Max and how Max is doing.
Well, right now I think he's asleep. Maxine, hey, come here, mate. Come here. Oh, he's very sleepy. He's like, why are you talking? It's 3 a.m. Come here, mate. Maxie, sit. Look, Max. Look.
Oh, hi, Max.
Hi, Maxie.
Hi, Max.
Big boy. Who's this then, Max? Who's that? You are an important and special person of the internet. Important and special. You'll get a carrot afterwards. This dog loves carrots. Crazy carrot eating dog. Yeah, no, that was an important question your community asked, and I'm very glad that they did.
Yes. I think he's a therapy dog for a lot of people out there.
Yes, there's all is well as long as Max is around, eating sticks and doing smelly farts.
Yes, right.
Thank you very much.
On that note, yes.
On that note, we should do this again sometime. It was awesome.
That would be great. That would be fantastic. We had a ton of questions from my community. Thank you guys so much for asking all these amazing questions. And Richard will have to have you on my channel, and then we'll interview you, and we're going to just ask you all of these questions because they had some really great ones. So Thank you for suggesting this, and thank you for your time and for being up in the middle of the night. So
no problem at all. All right, I'll see you soon.
Okay, take care. Good night, everybody.